Hi, it's me, Julie. I'm back with another edition of How to Leave Teaching, and I'm here with Mabel. She might fall asleep. I don't think she likes these topics, but I do. I want to talk about recovery in our teacher recovery series. And really, the topic I had for today is why recovery? Why is this an important topic when we're talking about leaving teaching? We're talking about career stuff, right? The nuts and bolts of the job hunt, how to find the next job that we even want, how to know what to do next, how to translate our skills. All that stuff's super important, but there's a big elephant in the room, and that's you, yourself, your sense of self. And if you're anything like me, you were trained to override your own needs for as many years as you've been teaching. So think about that. Teachers are conditioned to ignore hunger, exhaustion, illness, the need to take a piss, family times, emotions, boundaries, because there's always some need within the school system for you to give your resources, your personal resources to other people at the expense of yourself. And your worth, your value in the school becomes tied to how much you can carry and how little that you actually ask for in return. And that will fuck your sense of self worth. Recovery is this process of learning to stop abandoning yourself in order to prove that you care. So, this is much, much bigger than burnout. It has to do with burnout, but it's bigger than burnout. So, let's think about this. Weaponizing guilt, which is what happens in the school system, is manipulation. In a toxic school system, guilt is operationalized to keep teachers compliant. They ask you for all these unreasonable expectations, and then when you are suffering the effects of ignoring your own needs, they use guilt on you so that you make sense of that harm in a toxic way. You internalize the blame. You see what I'm saying? You tell yourself that if you were more dedicated, more resilient, if you put in more hours, or if you were simply better at your job, you could make it work. So if it's not working, it's your fault. The locus of control is attributed to you. And that painful story ends up becoming your narrative, and it fuels you, therefore, to continue to ignore your own needs. The environment taught you that you come last, your needs come last, and then you end up over functioning, over giving, people pleasing, and you end up losing who you are. Letting go of that guilt and the attendant shame that comes along with it, it's incredibly hard because the toxic school culture operates like a dysfunctional family. It needs you to believe that your struggles are entirely your fault. So it can continue to exploit your care, dismiss your needs, and manipulate you with phrases like, don't do it for the kids, do it for the kids. That's why we're here. We're doing it for the kids. And that's that overfunctioning, overgiving, people pleasing, and you start to lose who you even are. The system is built to benefit from your confusion, from your guilt, from your pain. And that's why it mind fucks you over and over, because it works. They get the free labor out of you that they need to prop the system up. The system's underfunded. The system is organized in a way that really doesn't make any sense. We really saw that with COVID and beyond, right? In order to patch up the holes in a broken system, they exploit teachers, and they do it with that guilt, with mindfuckery. So I want you to know that where you are right now is not a personal failure. It's not evidence that you don't have the resilience that it takes to keep teaching, or the character, or the dedication. It's the direct result of working inside a culture that is thriving and built on fear and shame and guilt and blame and scarcity and this pressure to self sacrifice. So, in other words, you were trying to do an impossible job inside a system that depends on your willingness to sacrifice yourself. And that's where you're starting to lose who you are anymore, because you're so focused on the world around you and surviving in this fucked up system that you lose contact with you, your inner self, your own identity. And you lose the ability to even like identify your own needs, because why would you need to identify your own needs in that system? They don't matter. And the more in touch you are with your own needs, the more painful it is that your needs aren't being met. So leaving the classroom can remove you from that environment, but it doesn't automatically remove that conditioning, right? So you can leave teaching and then still carry its rules into your next job, walking on eggshells, people pleasing, over functioning, losing your boundaries and burning out again. You can carry those rules into your relationships, into your daily life, where you're endlessly available and you're dancing like a monkey to anticipate everyone's needs and never cause any kind of inconvenience and even feel guilty for resting. So, recovering from teaching is really rewriting those rules. Like, I can care without sacrificing myself. I can help without taking responsibility for everything. I can disappoint someone without doing something wrong. Rest is not something that I have to earn. My needs matter even when someone else needs something too, right? In order to heal, I think from this kind of exploitation and mindfuckery, you first have to rewrite the story that you hold about yourself, because I think that we learn a new story when we're teaching that is toxic. It's a toxic script that says that a good teacher should tolerate exploitation. A good teacher should abandon their boundaries. A good teacher should destroy themselves for the sake of their students, for the kids. You were not failing the system. I think a lot of teachers really suffer with this guilt, but the system was the one failing you. The guilt also functions to keep us stuck. When I talk to teachers that want to leave the classroom, they are torn up about it, man. Oh my God. They're like, I just feel so guilty. What's going to happen to the kids? My kids, my kids, my kids. And they've lost the plot, man. They're burnt out. They say things like, I'm a shell of my former self. And yet they still cannot seem to understand that it's a bad situation that they need to leave. And I'm not saying this to be hard on you, because I went through this too, 100%. And it now looking back on it, it makes complete and total sense. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. My mom couldn't really handle working full time and having 4 kids. And so I was a parentified child. I was supposed to do cooking, cleaning, childcare, and I did do a lot of that at the expense of my own childhood and the expense of myself. And because I was praised for over functioning and praised for doing that, those parental duties, I then took that to mean that that's what's good about me, right? So I'm going to continue to sacrifice throughout my life. I'm going to continue to do more emotional, physical, or whatever kind of labor than is warranted, because that's where my self-worth comes from. That's my identity. Like, who am I even? Because I don't know who I am inside when I've been trained to handle everything about the external world and make it my problem and do that kind of over functioning. So I had to do a lot of rebuilding. And unfortunately, it took me a lot of years, like even after leaving the classroom, to get to this point. I had to figure out, like, what are my needs? That's really sad. Like, I want to cry right now, just even thinking that I was in that place, not knowing, being so out of touch with my own needs. That's really sad that I was programmed by my own family to to be that person that doesn't know who their own needs are, that my own family taught me that my needs came last. So of course I was drawn to teaching, right? Like, I loved being a teacher. There's a lot that I really loved about it, but the fact that I could withstand an environment where I was being exploited and um, think it was normal is is really evidence that I was so far from myself. Personally, what I ended up doing was getting in touch with my own needs, and it's not easy. You can go into a video if it's something that you're interested in about how I did that. There's kind of a step-by-step process that I did to get back to myself and to begin to identify my needs. Really starts with identifying your feelings, and then once you identify your feelings, you say, like, what do these feelings mean about what I need? Right? That's really kind of it in a nutshell, but that's kind of the first step to rebuilding and recovery when you're coming out of this kind of toxic programming and conditioning. Anyway, I'm sorry that other teachers are going through this too. It's really not a pretty thing to have to work through, but the good news is that you can build yourself back up into a good place. You can start to understand what your needs are. You can start to put boundaries in place. It takes a lot of practice and it's hella uncomfortable in the beginning, but you can get there. So, with that, Mabel is signing off, and we will be back with another episode next week.